Okay, Dr. Boyle, I'm only going to keep you for T-minus 10 minutes. You have the floor completely. Talk about your PhD with these guys, the mindsets, being around them, this cold-blooded, divorced from reality, divorced from conscience, this might makes right, survival of the fittest, this Nazi type or Malthusian amalgamation that we're facing right now.
Right. Well, as I was saying, I was trained to be a neoconservative at the University of Chicago by Strauss's co-author and literary executor later, Joseph Cropsey. Strauss had just retired when I showed up there, but I went through the exact same program that produced all these neoconservatives, and there are 2 books on them if you're interested by Professor Shadia Drury, D-R-U-R-Y, Leo Strauss and the American Right, and the Political Ideas of Leo Strauss. Professor Drury teaches political philosophy up in Canada, and she, to the best of my knowledge, she was never trained at the University of Chicago as I was. But I agree with everything Professor Drury says. These people are neo-Nazis. That comes directly from Strauss, who was trained by Schmidt, who was a Nazi. We still don't know why Schmidt was never prosecuted at Nuremberg or any of the subsequent proceedings. Influenced by Machiavelli, by Nietzsche, and Hobbes. Those are the main influences on the neoconservatives. And then from there I went to Harvard to get my PhD in, and certainly don't send your children to the University of Chicago for any reason. They will simply brainwash them to become neoconservatives. And then I went to Harvard to get my PhD in political science in the same program that produced Kissinger, Brzezinski, Huntington, and all the rest of these people. So, again, more of the same type of Machiavellian Hobbist thought, although not as, direct a connection to Schmidt as the University of Chicago was. So these people are very bright, completely ruthless, unprincipled, and motivated by a Nazi-type philosophy. There's no other word to describe it, in my opinion.
Continue, sir. I'm sitting back listening to you.
Well, if you want to get a PhD in political science at Harvard, you have to know your Machiavelli backward, forward, upside down, and in your sleep and by rote. So that should give you a pretty good idea. Kissinger, a Machiavellian to the core, Brzezinski as well. As I said, people like Wolfowitz, Chalabi, Khalilzad, Shulsky, and the neocons from Chicago. For that, you'd have to read Machiavelli, Hobbes, and Nietzsche as well. And so many of the neoconservatives today, both in the government, in academia, these news media pundits that get quoted, have all been trained in the same system. Alan Keyes, a classmate of mine at Harvard, studied with Harvey Mansfield, a Straussian. I could go on with a list of them. Fukuyama, another neoconservative. He wrote a review of Max Weber's The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism for the Sunday New York Times Book Review. They gave him the entire back page to do this on the 100th anniversary, and he analogized Weber to Carl Schmitt. And he didn't bother to mention anyone in this review that Schmitt was a Nazi. Indeed, it apparently did not matter to the New York Times that Fukuyama was referring to Schmitt the Nazi favorably, without identifying as a Nazi, because the Sunday New York Times book review editor was a neoconservative himself, and many of the people there at the New York Times, like Brooks, went through that program at the University of Chicago.
Well, they seem...
Crystal, who studied on the New York Times, he studied with Harvey Mansfield, the Straussian neoconservative at Harvard. So it's a very dangerous and incestuous situation. Bush himself made a speech at the American Enterprise Institute where he bragged that he had hired, I think it was somewhere between 20 and 25 Straussians in his administration. So all these people work in accordance with the this neo-Nazi philosophy, and so it doesn't surprise me that you would see the anthrax attack or anything else they're doing. They will stop at nothing.
Well, they've said, we have power, we've got to maximize it, we got to go for everything. And, I mean, they totally control McCain. Barack Obama's controlled by a lot of the same people. Do you even see them giving up power?
I don't think they want to. That's right. I think they want, all the neoconservatives now are working for McCain. This Randy Schooneman, his top foreign affairs advisor, was a director of the Project for the New American Century. I'm sure your listeners know all about PNAC and what they're about. He was just until recently a lobbyist for Georgia. So they've all congregated around McCain. And
let's briefly talk about that. Georgia, I mean, is that another manifestation of their arrogance? And why do we see so many Israelis picking up a Straussian view? I mean, they just believe in the philosophy of the Nazis. It's not even a racial thing, is it? Per se, Aryan race. It's the system and the ideals of governing. Correct?
I think that's correct. That there was collaboration between the earlier Zionists and the Nazi regime to try to get Jews into Palestine. Lonnie Brenner has a book on that if you want to read the correspondence itself. But in any event, yes, to get back to Georgia, even today, the Financial Times, the Deputy Defense Minister of Georgia admitted that when they attacked South Ossetia, he notice he's incriminating himself here in aggression. This is in today's Financial Times. He said, but he didn't believe Russia would respond. But he's admitting that yes, they unleashed the attack on South Ossetia.
Oh, that's huge news! I wasn't aware of that. Give me the name of the story.
It just came through Financial Times. Tbilisi admits miscalculating Russian reaction.
Oh,
the Deputy Defense Minister admitted that they launched the attack on South Ossetia. Now, we have to understand that attack would not have been launched without the approval of the Bush administration.
Well, we also don't just have neocons in NATO. We have their defense minister being Israeli, not even Georgian, their foreign minister. And the fact that they thought Russia wouldn't respond to a deadly sneak attack, and then now they're moving more missile systems in. They've yesterday kicked the ambassadors to NATO of Russia out. They didn't even do that during the World War, after World War II, and then into the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, this is getting to be unprecedented, and they're saying Russia will pay. Cheney made statements about, he called the Russian president up and said there will be a response to this and slammed the phone down. That was in the mainstream news. I mean, it's scary when you get these type of nuts. Now, I know they're very smart and controlled psychopaths, but at the same time, and they've codified it into a political science to give it some type of intellectual cover, they believe. But when you've got Karl Rove walking around saying we control reality to newspaper writers and you will just report on the new reality we give you, I mean, we see this psychology. Do you believe they've gone into megalomania?
Well, this is, consistent with these people are sociopaths. That's a regular position, psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever. They function that way. But, yeah, it's part of the neoconservative strategy here to basically resume a Cold War with Russia as they had against the Soviet Union, figuring that, the best way to deal with them is to destroy them if they can. So we've seen this promiscuous expansion of NATO right up to the border of Russia, despite the fact that when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Warsaw Pact collapsed, there was no reason at all for NATO to be around. Indeed, what happened was then the Bush Senior administration, instead of dissolving NATO, decided to give NATO two new purposes. One, policing Eastern Europe, control and domination of Eastern Europe.
And their first snack was funding people to attack the Serbs and start all
That's
that
correct.
going.
The opening shot of this was the war against Serbia, the bombing campaign against Serbia.
Was this to be another snack, to give that military system something to do? And obviously they thought the Russians wouldn't do what they've now done. Is this a big defeat of the neocons? And do you think this will generate more anger by them to have an outgoing victory?
Well, I think they knew how the Russians would respond because there were also reports of a large-scale Russian buildup in Russia right over the border.
So they fooled the Georgians and gave them bad intelligence.
Well, they ordered the Georgians in there. I mean, the Georgian army is a subsidiary of the Pentagon and the Israeli Ministry of Defense. We've armed, equipped, supplied, trained these people.